Welcome to Lokad Live. Joining us today is Dr. Meinolf Sellmann. Now, Meinolf is the CTO at InsideOpt. He's a decorated AI researcher, and most impressively of all, today he makes his second appearance on this channel. Now, Meinolf joins Joannes and me to discuss Agentic AI in supply chain. Some very quick housekeeping. For the first 30 minutes or so, Joannes and Meinolf will go back and forth, at which point we'll transition to audience questions. Which of course means that if you at any point want to ask questions, please do so in the live chat and we'll get to them later. And with that housekeeping out of the way, Meinolf, you are very welcome back to Lokad.
Thank you so much for having me, Connor, and it's good seeing you again, Joannes. Look forward to the discussion.
Well, first of all, Meinolf, a very technical question. What is a computer? I mean, what is Agentic AI?
Well, it's actually a super old term. When I gave the introduction to AI at Brown University 20 years ago, I used what has become kind of the standard textbook, the AI a modern approach. And literally so it's chapter 2, because chapter 1 just talks about the history of AI, but the first chapter that talks about AI in medias res, so what it actually is, talks on the first double page about agents. So you cannot think AI without thinking agents. And the idea, of course, is that somehow the intelligence is embedded in an environment. It perceives that environment, does some planning, and then performs some actions to then perceive the results of the actions and so on. So you might ask, well, if this is, if this was in the second edition of the textbook 20 years ago already, why on earth is it all of a sudden such a big buzzword? And that has a lot to do with the LLMs and the chatbots that are out there right now. Why? For two reasons. Well, first, the chatbot technology, as everybody knows by now, is not reliable. It hallucinates, it makes things up, it basically says what sounds best to say next, without really an understanding of the system it's dealing with. And in the first month after ChatGPT came out, people were already saying, oh, there isn't super veracity. Maybe if I have more than one chatbot and they talk to one another. So say the first one is supposed to make a business plan and the second then would go and critique the business plan and then hand that back to the first one. And, maybe like this in what we call thinking mode right now, you might actually get better results. That obviously didn't work out because people tried that right away after ChatGPT came out and it doesn't overcome the limitations of the LLMs. The other piece is that if you have a chatbot, if you have an LLM, you suddenly have access to completely different actuators than you normally have. If you play chess with a computer, that's, it's an AI that you're dealing with, and the perception is the chessboard. Then it makes some planning and makes its next move, actuates it, and that's it. But with a chatbot, you can go and search the web. You can turn it into an SQL query and send it to a database. You can even produce your own code if you want to and execute that. The problem remains the same, though, which is that if no agent ever proposes the right code, then you're not going to end up with the right code, no matter how many of them are working. So this is like, an overview of what AI is. So it's perception, planning, and then execution, and then going over again. And we're talking about this right now because we have much more powerful tools right now that we can give as actuators.
Well, thank you, Meinolf. And Joannes, anything to add to that, please?
Yeah, if we take, I think, most of what is getting the attention of the public when they say agent is it's a layer of instrumentation on top of LLMs. And LLMs have tons of limits, but there are more than a few things where they are quite useful. And what happens when you start using an LLM for the things where it works, for example, help me rephrase this badly constructed sentence in English into something that would be kind of better, is that you realize that you end up copy and pasting stuff to the chatbot interface a lot. And that can be very, very tedious work. Like, I want to sort of look for inconsistencies in my text. Let's say you have a 30-page long report, but if you want to have, I would say, considering the limitation of LLM technology, somewhat good results, you would say, okay, first focus on the first paragraph and really analyze that in depth and tell me if there is something that goes wrong. Okay, you've done the first paragraph. Now I want to repeat for the second one and the third.
Right.
A programmer could implement their routine to do that with, it's a super naive routine, it's just a loop with a programming language and just iterate. That's why what Lokad has been done since 2023 for many tasks. But for the general public who is not, familiar with programming languages, they say, oh, there is this super simple loop that I need, and I need the LLM to invoke itself kind of recursively. It's a very naive, first order recursion, and just proceed. And when you add this tiny layer of instrumentation, which is just do a loop, call yourself recursively something like 30 times and compile your results, you extend the scope of usefulness of LLMs. Arguably, it is not really pushing the frontier of intelligence. It is still same limitations, same technology, but in terms of usefulness, it is clearly pushing the frontier, especially because LLMs are slow, and so you can just let this thing takes half an hour to do its 30 subqueries or whatever, and then come back, as opposed to wait 1 or 2 minutes for every query and then repeat. So my take is that those agents are just, the way they are marketed right now, it is a thin layer of instrumentation. It can be quite clever and it can be quite useful. And I think the best cases for that, although it is a very, very limited definition compared to the original agent that you mentioned, is I think things like along the lines of OpenAI deep research, which is an agent that just say, look the top 100 pages that seems to be relevant, produce a digest for every page based on the query, and then consolidate all of that into something that makes sense. It's very, you could have done it page per page manually, but it would have taken a little bit forever. So I believe it certainly increased the usefulness, but it's certainly not, that would be my short take, pushing the envelope of what we can, how close we are in terms of genuine AI.
Yeah, and actually, Meinolf, to come back to you, because that is, you mentioned deep research, and that is something I wanted to ask, because Meinolf, when you opened up the conversation, your definition, you were talking about the AI perceiving actions, but then, Joannes, the way you just described it, and Meinolf, correct me where I'm wrong, but you basically made it sound as if deep research, the tool inside ChatGPT, let's say o1, is essentially under the hood, not radically different from 3.5, but it can just do more things without supervision.
It's literally the same model, same LLM. It is,
but it's agentic, so it's basically indistinguishable.
At least people market it like that. I believe that. The usefulness is real, although it is not necessarily as game changer as people can think it is. But it is a nice instrumentation to have on top of LLM. And again, that's part of the evolving packaging. It is not, certainly it is not game changing in the sense of let's double the valuation of the company. People were expecting, I would say, when I saw this sort of technology 2023, pretty much all people that were a little bit tech savvy thought, okay, these things, just having a text interface is not the pinnacle of smart instrumentation of those LLMs. I think the best example right now in the market for smart instrumentation are Cursor, and which is a integrated development environment where they help you to produce bugs faster than the speed of light. Just kidding, but to edit your code smartly, and Manus, which also provides a lot of tooling on top of an LLM.
Well, Meinolf, your thoughts there again, that in the example of deep research, which Joannes has classified as essentially agentic AI, that it is borderline indistinguishable from what the mainstream would understand as classic LLMs, for example, the ChatGPT 3.5 model from late 2022.
No, no, that's true. But I mean, especially in the context of say supply chain, of course, the actuators that you're talking about. So it's a different kind of environment, right? So if you're just talking with the LLM itself, the environment is essentially I get some text, I produce some text, I get some text, I produce some text, and yes, you can put more instrumentation, more layers on top of this. You can make it. You can make it a RAG, so which means it's retrieval augmented, meaning you get additional information from external sources. You can hook this up to your email inbox and get more information from there. But that is still kind of within the realm of, okay, so I'm just talking to a machine right now, and that's the environment. Now, if you turn agentic AI and put it into an environment where you might say, oh no, actually you're in the real world. So say what Apple is trying to do with Siri right now. Siri has always been an agent, but it wasn't an AI enabled. I mean, other than that, it had speech recognition. It would perceive what you ask it to do, like turn on the music. That was the actuator, right? It could turn on the music. Or it could order you some stuff or put something on your calendar, but it would then repeat it for you so that you can give the final go ahead and say, oh yeah, you understood that correctly, go ahead and do that. And then it would go and do it. Now they want to augment this by saying, maybe I just give it some goal and say, well, move all my meetings by an hour. And then it's supposed to go into your calendar, right? Put all the updates in there and do something intelligent about it. And the fact that it still isn't on the market is tells you something. It tells you that you cannot just do all of these things, which might be very consequential for a person if the whole calendar gets reshuffled. If you don't trust that the AI actually understood the request correctly.
Well, actually. Thank you, Meinolf. And this actually comes to something you'd said before, Joannes, which was when we were talking purely about LLMs and generative AI, of which LLMs are in our class, a few years ago, and then last year when we repeated the discussion, you made the claim that, and I've written it down, can be deployed almost exclusively for text-based tasks. Is that the same scope for agentic AI, in your opinion? Bear in mind, you just said they're basically indistinguishable from LLMs.
Yes. Again, you are... what is currently marketed as agents are instrumentation on top of LLMs, which are doing essentially text completions. So for example, if you want to pilot your supply chain, let's say you want to optimize routes for your trucks, it is a very sort of structured format that you want. And then we are not talking of generating an answer that is going to be a few kilobytes of text. We are talking of, if you have like a fleet of, let's say, 200 trucks, that each one of those trucks are going to make like 200 stops or, whatever. I mean, we are talking of potentially megabytes of super structured data, and this is what you need to generate. And here, even before considering the quality of the sort of analysis that you would get, just LLMs are just very, very badly suited to even generate this sort of data, let alone generate data that would be truly optimizing whatever is your target. That is the problem. Is that it's literally you have a mismatch. What you're trying to generate is not text. It's not even close to text. And LLMs are completion models, one token at a time. That just doesn't fit.
So while I agree with that, and I share your skepticism that LLMs will get us there, somebody, I'll take the position of somebody who would be doing that, right? So if I were working at OpenAI, I'd say yes, but I'm not putting in the data myself. I write the SQL query that then gives me the data, and then I shove it into the model. And that's kind of what they do. The problem is, can you trust that the correct data will be pulled? Can you trust that if it's not a fixed optimization model, is that the model will be stood up correctly? And that's the issue, right? It's like you would need an additional layer of assurance surrounding it, that if you put a human in the loop in order to do that assurance, defeats the purpose of automating it.
I completely agree. I mean, and that's the sort of things where you end up as, okay, the LLM is just going to generate the code to do it. Fine. But then why would you want to regenerate the code every single time. You would much prefer to do it once, have a human validate the code, and then remove entirely the LLM from the picture. And that's where we get very fuzzy, because then in this case, fine, but then we are back to LLMs as coding assistants. And I guess it's fine. It is useful. It is useful. Although clearly this is not, I think, what the market have in mind when they think agents. You know, it's not productivity tools for software engineers.
Yes.
Well, my question is for anyone who's listening and they've been sold a bill of goods, like, for example, and again, you can do your own Google searches and find very appealing and attractive claims, like AI agents. They're going to take control of the end-to-end decision-making process in supply chain or a number of sectors. So, Meinolf, will come first to you, and then Joannes for your thoughts. What tasks do you believe, Meinolf, are actually possible to automate today using our current understanding of agentic AI?
Tasks that don't matter.
Well, you heard it here, people.
Well, it's. I mean, again, coming back to the Siri example. I mean, they don't even let you mess with your calendar, right? Because they just can't get it under control. And I mean, would you trust business critical decisions to something that's 98% correct? That means that in 100 days you're bankrupt, right? It's not a good idea to be doing that. So you can do it for inconsequential things where essentially if the thing gets it wrong, you have an easy recourse. There's not much damage done, and you can just get it going. Otherwise, you would need to invent something that performs some form of assurance, so some form of quality control, whether what the LLM just produced is actually correct, and that gives you an additional problem, right? So Joannes mentioned quite rightfully that in supply chain, most of the tasks are recurring tasks. So why on earth would I regenerate the code every single time? But what people have in mind is, of course, well, very often I have to do things that are just one-offs, where I just need to produce some glue code in order to bring in this additional data, but that was never kind of properly linked or something like this. And you're not going to do this as a matter of course, and again and again and again. You just want to do it to answer the current question at hand. But now comes the problem. I mean, if you wanted to do this, and you could do this, how do you build something that would check whether it was done correctly? That doesn't suffer from the same veracity issues and the thing that generated the original code. And that's the problem that hasn't been overcome yet. You can do these kind of, simple sanity checks or things like that if you have some form of domain knowledge of the system that you're after. I mean, this is often what we do if we use machine learning, for example, in business critical applications. I used to be at GE, for example, and the team would, for example, use machine learning, of course, to forecast when an engine needs maintenance. Obviously, you don't just want to just go by what the LLM is saying. I'm sorry, what the machine learning is saying there. You need to put some form of assurance around it. You need to say, is this model competent to answer the question that I'm giving it right now? And you can do that. I mean, you can relate the current query, the current feature input that goes into the machine learning to the training data, for example, and then see whether the corresponding type of machine learning model is actually suited to answer this kind of question. So give you a simple example. Say I have training data here and here, and I put a linear function between it. I can kind of trust it in the middle where I didn't have any training data. If you used a random forest, which is essentially a piecewise constant approximation thereof, in the middle there where you didn't have any data, do not trust it, right? Because the thing does a simple z over there, and you're just off. You cannot trust that model. You can do this, but as you can see by the example, you need to put a lot of domain knowledge both on the machine learning side as well as on the application side in there in order to automatically monitor whether you can trust the machine learning recommendations right now. And for LLMs, this work hasn't been done yet. It is something that everybody seems to be assuming when they go like, oh, we'll have AGI in 5 years and the singularity where the AI writes more AI and boom, they're gone. And that just isn't there as long as you can't assure this and make this an engineered process where something would say, okay, this code was wrong, but this one is better. And until that isn't the case, it's like monkeys hitting the typewriter, hoping to put Hamlet together. You can't do that. If something says, oh yeah, that A on the first letter on the first page was correct, but I can't wait until you've written the whole thing and then look at it and go like, yeah, not Shakespeare, do it again. And that's the state that we're in right now.
Well, thank you. And I do want to pitch the question back to you, Joannes, but I do want to make a little bit of a tweak because I asked Meinolf what tasks he thought could be automated. To summarize, nothing that trivial things, essentially. Do you share that opinion? And if you think that there are higher order tasks that can be automated, how do you think people can erect guardrails around the concerns that Meinolf just raised?
The twist that I would say is that I agree that nothing that matters, but it might still represent 90% of the workforce, of back office workforce of many companies. You know, that this sort of insanity is that people who are having, push buttons jobs, I would say we are talking of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people worldwide. I've seen many companies where, for example, you have literally dozens of clerks who are just copying and pasting part numbers from one system to another. And you would think, why on earth don't you do some kind of actual IT integration to get the things done? And the answer is the system A is super ancient, system B is super ancient.
Yes.
And we need to copy 200 references a day. It's a pain, but we just keep doing it manually forever. So that's the sort of thing. And you can end up with departments where literally maybe half of the people are actually, or half of the time of the people is dedicated to this sort of nonsense clerical task where I guess I agree that's this sort of thing, but we're not talking of decisions. Here we're talking of extremely like mind-numbing, dumb stuff like take from here, put it here, and interact by the screen
Clerical
because it's the only thing that doesn't require the involvement of IT that has like 4 years of backlog already. But yes, otherwise, so it can be kind of consequential because for those companies who have like enormous amount of those people, that would still be consequential. But again, we are talking of eliminating what is basically busy work, not in-depth thinking about decisions where real money is at stake. It's that on I very much agree.
I mean, to ask you a question though, would you do that? So say you're merging two banks and you need to take the account numbers from one bank and somehow merge them over to the other one. I mean, you wouldn't want to do this manually because humans also make mistakes when they put all these numbers over there. But at the same time, you wouldn't necessarily trust an LLM to do that either, right? Because afterwards, business companies might not have the correct routing numbers anymore.
Yeah, but I can reassure you, Lokad has like 5 banks. They make mistakes all the time. Literally. All the time.
They do.
So,
they do,
when people tell me, oh, LLMs make mistakes, I say, the people that we have working for us do make mistakes as well. And so I would say it's a wash. My take would be, it will be a wash on those sort of things. But
well, the point there is it does tap into a bit of an issue that people have when it comes to the adoption of AI in general, because a lot of people are obviously very excited. But again, to come back to something you said earlier, Meinolf, I mean, you might have like 98% accuracy using an LLM on a somewhat trivial clerical task, but then you're missing 2%. And all I thought was, I mean, what's the error rate for any person who's given a number of Excel sheets to go over? I mean, to Joannes' comment about it being a wash. Like, are we sorry, but just the sentence. Is it an unrealistic expectation to expect 100% accuracy from any piece of software at all times at scale, bearing in mind what that software is trying to replace, which is error-prone people?
Well, okay, so I mean, that latter part is an important one, but sure, I mean, we are generally expecting our software to be correct.
yes.
And even, I mean, it sounds like, hey, 98%, that's awesome, but it isn't. I mean, if you, again, I come from a culture at General Electric. Six Sigma is the word, because if you're going out of an airplane with a parachute, for example, and you have a 98% chance that this parachute will open, you really better not jump out of an airplane. All right, it's like you need that thing to be 4, 5, 6 sigma correct and working, and then you probably have another emergency parachute there as well. And the same is true for business, right? So if I do, what Lokad does, what people are using our software for, and I make decisions, for example, how much I'm going to order, and that was 98% correct. And suddenly I'm sitting on tons. I mean, after a while, you're going to sit on tons of stale inventory in your warehouses that you don't know how to move, that's clogging up every system that you might have to write off. And that can make the difference between a profitable year and a year in which you're making losses. This is already not a decision that you would want to leave to something that was just unattended and unsupervised and do it automatically.
Yeah, I think the real problem that I see is that if we have like a clerical task where humans make 2% error, this is not good. The LLM might make 2% error, it is not good. But where it's the catch is that you have no reason to think that the humans would, unless they're under drugs or anything, go to from 2% error to 90% error. And the problem is that when you leave something unattended, is that sometimes things can go like super, super wrong. There is a bug, a glitch. There is an upgrade that went super wrong, and then you're left with something that gives you complete garbage results. And that's I think that's the main catch to operate this sort of in production. If you were absolutely confident that you would remain exactly as good as a human operator forever, yeah, that would be acceptable. Now the catch is, if you're lacking, as Meinolf was describing, any kind of validation criterion, it's very dangerous to leave something unattended. If that's really in practice in IT, you tend to leave things unattended when you are sure that you're like 100% correct, because that's what you shoot for. When you're in the gray area, it becomes like a very tricky proposition.
Yes. And we do that for humans, right? So if you're a broker, for example, and you're handling stockbroking, there is this phenomenon of a sixth thumb, right? So where you suddenly put an extra zero someplace, or you double the number, and before you know it, you order 10 times as much as you wanted. There are usually guardrails surrounding this that say, no, this broker can't make transactions of this size, right? So you limit the impact that errors can have in order to mitigate the consequences of errors. But if an LLM generates codes and come back and says, well, this is what we ought to be doing, where are the checks and balances, right? How do you know whether that was the correct thing to do or not?
Yeah. Well, my question is, and I was actually just making a note of this here because I wanted to get the wording just right. Joannes, so you just pointed out that it's very unlikely that a person less under the influence of some sort of intoxicant would increase the error rates by, let's say, an order of magnitude. But that then kind of perhaps butts against something that you had previously said before, which was that LLMs, and this was about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, in a live chat, in fact, you said, were an extinction event for white collars, and yet now you just said that the guardrails might not be there yet. So how do you square those two?
No, I mean, I still think that ultimately those very ultra tedious busy work, sort of tasks will be automated, and that's an opportunity. And I think that's really paving the way. And I've seen in many companies that they have tons of clerks who are doing things that are thoroughly unintelligent. So that's still an extinction event. I think that's still, I would say, on the menu. That's still on the menu. Now. It means that also you need, again, instrumentation to keep some supervision. Again, the thing is that companies had developed habits on how do you do that. You have a clerk who is doing copy and paste. How do you do to make sure that this guy 6 months down the road is not doing like complete crap? The answer is that you have a supervisor that has a look at a sample of the work being done. Well, if we automate this sort of tedious work with an LLM that is not infallible, then you still need the instrumentation to do this exact sort of thing. So I still think that this incredible busy work will be, I would say, largely automated. But it's not, I would say, what I'm saying is that it is not the promise that we are seeing in the price of agents that are fully autonomous and whatnot. It is more like automate the busy work, keep supervisor in the loop so that they will sample things, and it will require, I would say, some thinking to find heuristics to detect when things go wrong. Just like the idea of having the LLM entering, for example, a provably nonsensical value should be a way to, okay, let's pause the system, let's have a supervisor looking at it. But that requires tooling. And I believe that through the present, I would say the present stage of people developing agents, it's a very, very fancy marketing term to say, let's develop the layers of instrumentation that we need to operate those LLMs in productions for where they are useful, with the instruments that are needed to be confident in what is happening, which is not exactly the dream of full unattended execution. But still, the productivity savings can be quite significant for those dumb tasks.
All right. Well, I'm getting close to wrapping up and turning over to audience questions. So before I ask the last question, if you do want to ask Meinolf and Joannes something, do drop it in the live chat. Meinolf, I'll come back to you first. So based on everything that we've said so far, and taking into consideration all the caveats and discussion of security and guardrails, for people who are watching, let's say C-level people watching, who are really jazzed on the idea of agentic AI and possibly even feel pressure to, FOMO, not to miss out on the wave, what practical advice would you impart to people who want to experiment with this technology?
So, I mean, what I would say, right? So coming back to this agentic loop, right? So perceive, plan, and act. That planning piece is, of course, something that has been researched tremendously. And what you need to make sure is that there isn't garbage in, garbage out, right? So if the model that you're actually running on a solver is wrong, then you're going to get wrong recommendations. If the data that goes in there is wrong, you're going to get wrong recommendations. So you need to make sure that there's some veracity there. But you do have amazing advances on the ability to provide decision guidance under uncertainty. And that is not to be mistaken with the 98% accurate LLM. These are optimization methods that look through a tremendous amount of potential ways to operate your system. And you can make your operations more resilient and more efficient at the same time using this kind of technology. But it's not to be mistaken with this, I come out of a completely fuzzy world where somebody gives me a textual description of the task that I have to do. I turn that into code, query whatever data I can query with no sanity checks of whether it's the right data, and then I shove it in there. But use that piece and then use good old-fashioned optimization engineers and experts surrounding it in order to harness this kind of AI, which is a different one than the transformers we've been talking about.
Thank you, Meinolf. And Joannes? Same question.
My advice would be very meta, would be to invest on a much more written culture. So, because the thing is that until very recently, until LLMs, we had basically nothing. I mean, NLPs was 100 different techniques that were giving you results of various interests. But fundamentally, there was nothing to really deal with text materials, at least with a computer, in any way. I mean, you could maybe translate stuff, and even that was typically not, until very recently, of sufficiently high quality to be even used for business purposes. So now what we have is an ability to automatically process text with plenty of caveats, but it kind of works. But what I found is that very frequently the amount of textual materials in most companies is extremely lacking. So just like companies started 20 years ago to really put their digital records in order, to organize, your records into nice systems and whatnot, I would say it's probably time with this emergence to put your culture in writing, so that, for example, you have, let's say, for every task that people do extremely repetitively, do you have a document that just documents what the person is doing? And very frequently, there is none. And I think this investment, the beauty of it is that even if what people expect from LLMs and agents don't pan out, I see a lot of value to just realize that a lot of things can be automated even without AI. Once you put it in writing, you realize, okay, this thing is just a piece of glue that should be handed over to the IT. And so I would say that would be my advice is, yes, invest in writing pretty much the task down, write the why you're doing things. If those technologies pan out, it will be tremendously useful to have that written. If not, you're still in a good place to further automate your business, further clarify your business, and hopefully eliminate a lot of the busy work.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you both. For now, I do have some other things I want to clarify, but I did say I would get to the audience questions at about 3:30. So I'll come first to Meinolf, please. This question comes from Constantine. Is it too soon to judge agentic AI? Could early AI agent versions, such as OpenAI's pre-GPT-4 models, seem unimpressive now, but automate most clerical tasks within a year or two?
I honestly, I don't believe it. I mean, the reason why people thought that this could be done is that scaling laws, which aren't actually physical laws, but observations, that if you give the thing way more data, you suddenly get better answers. Let's put it that way. And people thought that, once you push in the entire internet into these LLMs for training, you'll need to buy a lot of NVIDIA hardware to do that. But yeah, okay, if you've done that and spent the millions and billions that went into that, that then you would have something that basically covers all your bases. And it turns out it doesn't. And these scaling laws are coming to an end. There's more and more experiments that are saying, just by doubling the data, we are not going to see any more advancements. Plus, we're running out of data to train LLMs at this time. So now people have kind of come to this agentic AI to say, well, maybe if I let an LLM talk to another LLM and push that back and put some instrumentation surrounding it, I can overcome this. I do not believe that. I believe the bulk of AI researchers do not believe that. They instead focus on what is called neurosymbolic AI now. So the combination of statistical inference, so transformer-based inference and LLMs, and something that can actually follow hard and fast rules. And if you think about your own brain, it certainly appears like we have both. And we get very confused if one system says like, yeah, but this should be this, and the other thing says, yeah, but that can't be. And so it appears that even in natural evolution of intelligence, we do have both reasoning types sitting next to one another. And that's kind of where the research is pushing. The problem is that we don't have any integrated research algorithms or algorithmic frameworks, let's put it that way, that would be effective at putting both types of reasoning together. And that's the state of the art. So there's really nothing that would actually indicate, hey, we are an epsilon away from making that breakthrough of having really effective neurosymbolic AI. And I believe that neurosymbolic AI will be needed in order to have an LLM with high veracity.
Right, thank you, Meinolf. Joannes, same question. Is it too soon to judge agentic AI?
I don't think it is too soon to judge the agentic AI, the current paradigm. I think things like Manus give you a relatively good perspective of what an LLM nicely instrumented can do, which is, frankly, it is kind of a lot. It is kind of a lot.
Yes.
It is like it's an LLM that has access to searching the web, putting notes in a text file, and then iterating over its own text file to repetitively tick the marks for many tasks that you have to do. So it is, for me, it is very impressive. I would say, to have a tool that is able to recursively instantiate itself to complete a series of subtasks. Yes, they are not mind-bogglingly complicated, but it is still, I can see a lot of situations where it's going to be very useful. We can also see that companies like Manus, who really embrace the limitations of LLMs, as opposed to, let's say, the operator of OpenAI. For the audience, operator is something that operates through screenshots, only screenshots. And the operator of OpenAI that operates through screenshots then moves the mouse and then extra, so very, very minute commands. It is incredibly slow. And then you can even see the LLM sometimes misclick the screen. So it closed the wrong tab, for example. And then, bam, it takes 5 minutes to reopen the right tab and whatnot. So I believe that if you expect 2 years from now, operator, so a screenshot-based version of the LLM that kind of works fluently, I don't see, even for simple stuff, I do not see that really realistically. I believe, on the contrary, I believe that approaches like Manus that cheat, so they kind of have an environment that is incredibly text-driven to really fit the LLM, will be very useful for a lot of things. And then the main limitation that I see, which I see a main limitation for LLMs that is slightly different from the one that Meinolf says. The main limitation that I see is that there is no learning. Learning currently we have a paradigm that is, say, first you train, then you have inference, and there is no learning. And that is very painful, because if you see, for example, it's something that I actually I tried with ChatGPT on the operator, of OpenAI, to do some basic task of having 2 tabs open and just copying data from one to another. Due to the fact that it doesn't learn, it will repeat the same mistakes every single time. So it will use twice as many clicks and twice as many screenshots every single time. It never learns anything. It doesn't capture the fact that, okay, I have discovered the task. Now I should maybe try to optimize in which order I click things, in which order I copy and paste things, etc. So, I mean, it's just to give you an idea that the main problem is that even if you give it a simple task to a human, you would expect that when the intelligence carries a task for the second time, third time, fourth time, at least you seize the low-hanging fruits to make this task kind of, more fluid. And currently with LLMs, the very paradigm of that, we lack that. So that means that whatever optimization you want to have has to be shoved upfront in the prompt. This is...
They have to learn to be more lazy.
Yes, again, we don't have... that's the problem of I would say, the LLM paradigms, is that what we have, the closest thing is fine-tuning. But it's very, I would say, it is very superficial, very, very superficial.
Yes.
Well, thank you. I'll move on to the next question, which is, what area of supply chain do you think will benefit the most from AI in the coming years? So, Meinolf, to you, please, first.
Oh, that's good, because AI is much broader than LLMs, as I alluded to in the last statement of the intro. I believe that, everybody in supply chain talks about VUCA, right? It's like, the complexity is there. It's very, very difficult to actually see through everything. At the same time, you're dealing with high volatility and just uncertain events and just the possibility of things going wrong. And where I see that people are not using AI enough is on this integration of machine learning to forecast the uncertainty and to somehow rein it in, not to get rid of it completely, but to say we have an idea of what could happen. with some probability, and then pipelined into optimization. So what should I be doing given that this is my probabilistic assessment of what might happen? And that is readily available. So you don't have to wait for AGI for this or some major breakthrough of OpenAI or DeepSeek or Grok or whatever else is out there. You can actually do this right now. And there's additional advantages. I mean, we've just seen the announcement from NVIDIA of QOpt, which is an interesting one. So using GPUs in order to solve large-scale linear programs. That might actually open the door to, I think right now they're focusing mostly on routing problems. I have my issues with the warm starting capabilities there, but there's certainly exciting developments on the optimization side right now happening. And you can optimize much more than what you might have learned 10 years ago if you went to business school then. You can do stochastic optimization, you can do multi-objective optimization, you can do non-convex optimization rather efficiently. And it's a good idea to take advantage of that.
Thank you. Joannes, same question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely aligned with Meinolf. The mundane, quantitative decisions can completely be automated. Again, it needs instrumentation supervision, but this thing, there is no reason anymore to have people go through an ocean of spreadsheets to generate the tens of thousands of decisions that a sizable company needs on a daily basis for their supply chain, such as, how much do I reorder for every single SKU, these sort of things. If we are talking to AI as in Gen AI for supply chain, I think where you can have a lot of benefits is for things like catalog management, product descriptions. I mean, very frequently, these sort of things are in a very dismal state. So you have products that are with low quality labels. All you have is a PDF provided by the supplier that describes the products, but it's either a label that says screw or a 10-page PDF that describes everything there is to know about this screw.
Right.
And that's, you see, so that's the sort of things where with LLMs you could probably vastly improve the quality of labels, of plenty of metadata, I would say simple enrichments that just improve the quality of life for many mundane operations.
Well, actually, I am going to come to you, Meinolf, but that actually transitions because the next question was explicitly, what is the difference between a supply chain running on agentic AI and one which is not running on agentic AI? And could you please provide some real-world examples? And you just outlined such a data health management checks and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, if we go back to agentic AI as defined in the textbook of Meinolf, I mean, there isn't one. There isn't one. Not even close. Not even close. So what?
It's vague.
Yeah, it's vague, but
it's not a mathematical definition.
Yes. So I mean, if we take, I would say, agentic AI as in ChatGPT operator or their equivalent, I do not see that even close to being a realistic options for supply chain. If we look at, for example, ChatGPT operator, we have something that is about 10 times, I would say, slower than a human to just click and move through the screen. So, I mean, that's a very sluggish agent. You're not going to have supply chain run with as if it was your grandma that is like 90 years old that is doing the cut and paste. I mean, it is still nice. Again, if we go back to this sort of busy work where you have 200 entries to copy from one system to another manually every day, you could have this sort of automation bypassing IT to do it, and then you remove a super tedious task that takes like 3 hours for someone to do, and it's done for you. But yeah, we are very far from supply chain AI piloted through agents sort of supply chains.
Well, if I can just follow back, and this is to sort of a meta reference because I'm about to ask you directly. First, Joannes, and then Meinolf. But Joannes, this is a follow-up to that, and it references something we've talked about before, but we have not yet released. So the first question was, what's the difference between a supply chain running on agentic AI and one which is not? In direct terms, okay, you're saying we're not there, but you've talked previously about let's say, supply chain practitioners using agentic AI for, let's say, research, which for their supply chain purposes might be evaluating vendors, identifying appropriate software, which indirectly then runs the supply chain. So perhaps you could comment on the use of AI agents in that capacity.
Yeah, I mean, again, if we say AI agents understood as an instrumentation layer on top of LLMs, it has plenty of useful. It is plenty useful. You want to do a market research, and you know that you're going to spend the entire afternoon going through 100 pages. The OpenAI deep research and Google with Gemini has an equivalent tool, will do that for you quite efficiently. And the results are very satisfying. It is a true time saver, even if the tool is not perfect, even if it misunderstands many pages and whatnot. I've used this tool. It saves a lot of time. So for a lot of I would say, minutiae, especially when it relates to paperwork, going through documents, it is a fantastic tool. But that's really improved the productivity of existing people as opposed to replacing people. So you see, again, that's very different. It's more on the category of very nice, fancy productivity tools as opposed to be an agent that operate and autonomously and just replace an employee.
Okay. Meinolf, anything to add on that before we move on?
Yes. I mean, I completely agree there. I think we're still talking about AI assistance, but the overall orchestration of all the pieces that need to come together, what data do I pull, to what model am I going to give this next, how do I interpret the results, how do I verify the results, that to me would mean an agentic supply chain where really there is an AI agent that makes the decisions and executes them automatically. And I think the skepticism has been more than clear. It's, yes, you want these AI assistants, you absolutely want to use Lokad or InsideOpt or something like that in order to optimize your decisions and to do your planning. But you do want to make sure that you give these tools and models the correct data, invoke them at the right time, and of course design your supply chain correctly. Yes. To me, you could argue that any AI is an agent, but I think what people mean with an AI or an agentic supply chain is this full orchestration done automatically, which I don't believe in. So I don't think that's coming anytime soon.
Well, actually, and that transitions to one of the questions that came in through LinkedIn, and Meinolf, I'll come to you first on this. If AI agents take over most clerical and tactical decisions, what is the next breakthrough needed for them to handle strategic supply chain decisions? Parentheses, or should these always remain in human hands?
So I think, I mean, it's a question on how you want to define those terms. But I think what people generally mean with it is, well, if it's a routine job, if it's, we spoke about this before when Joannes mentioned, hey, if you do this again and again and again, why on earth would you want to regenerate the code, right? So if you have a task that is repetitive, that is intellectually routine, and those white-collar jobs, I agree with Joannes, are in danger of being automated away. Yes, you can absolutely do that. The question there is, do you want to use an LLM in order to generate that code, or don't you want to make sure that this extra quality and very efficient and very, very good? Because, precisely because the investment pays off over the many thousand times that this tool will be invoked. So now a strategic decision is more one where it's like a one-off, right? It's this one thing. Okay, should I go digital with my store? Or do I stay like a toy store that is just around the corner and only has a physical presence but none online? And to answer such a question, of course, you need to go through a number of different tasks, like how much it costs you, what does that do to your customer base, what are the investment costs, what are the potential benefits, etc. If you believe that such business questions appear, maybe not for the same company, but across many different companies a lot of times, Then again, we're talking about actually a task that could be automated, that it would make sense to kind of invest in, hey, here's like an automated business consultant that understands the standard questions that businesses have to go through and that might help you through those strategic decisions. There, yes. If it's a true one-off, I still believe that it's a very good idea to talk to a human and somebody who has some experience in the market and with the particular question that is at hand. And I don't think that we're anywhere close to automatically orchestrating such questions in such a way they could answer one-off questions and just trust the answer that comes out of the computer.
Well, thank you, Meinolf. Joannes, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the way Lokad approach supply chains, we are typically not embracing the classical horizon splitting approach of operational, tactical, and strategic. You see, the way I think is that it's the wrong way to think about the problem. And I believe that the way Meinolf asks the question is how frequently those questions arise is much more interesting. Mm-hmm. Because you see, the thing is, the way Lokad think of it is that automation, you can create a numerical recipe that will give you an answer for those questions with a human mind. Now, human mind is expensive, so you want ideally to have those people who are scarce focus on the very, very repetitive sort of questions. So that's going to be more operational rather than strategic, just because the cost of creating a bespoke numerical recipe, yes, testing it, assessing, etc., it's just that's where there is a profitability. But that means that if we start thinking about like that, you realize that the boundary between the automation and the human intelligence is really about assessing the quality of the numerical recipe. You see,
yes.
And so the way we think of it is that, okay, we need a human mind to assess every single time to assess the quality of a recipe. If the recipe is about something that is super recurrent, that we will engage into a fairly sophisticated recipe to really max out the sort of profitability that we can get. That would be, let's say, daily replenishment. And if we have something that is asked once a year, we will be much more on the verge of back of the envelope calculation, just because we are not going to do, 5 days, etc. But that's, you see, the delimitation exists for every horizon. Even for the super short-term horizon, we still need to have this ingredient of human intelligence to assess the adequacy of the numerical recipe. So fundamentally, we have no horizon that can be done without the human mind. And in a way, if it's done correctly, pretty much all questions, once a human mind step in, can largely automate the process. But you see, but it's not necessarily worth doing it, just because a lot of those questions are too infrequent to warrant the investment it would take.
Right.
Right. Well, gentlemen, we're coming up on the hour, and the last question, this is on LinkedIn, and it's an interesting one because we've talked a lot about the very technical perspectives on this technology, because both of you are eminent in this regard.
Yes.
But this is interesting, and it's short. What attitude do you see from your clients towards LLMs and AI agents? Actually, Joannes will go first, so that way I can give the last word to you, Meinolf. So, Joannes, you first. Clients' attitudes.
What we see is that the executives are very impressed. So I think ChatGPT impressed the hell out of pretty much everybody on Earth. It is a little bit mind-boggling, a little bit. And so the consequence of that is that we get RFPs that says, help us to transition toward AI.
Yeah.
And
do you keep your AI in fireproof drawers?
Yeah, and then exactly as Connor is pointing out, in the same RFP that asks us about AI, there is question number 612 that says, what are your fireproofing? Give us the specifics of our fireproofing practices for
fax
the rooms
machines
that you use for your fax archives.
Yeah.
So here we are, that's the RFP that we face. So my take is, I think there is genuine interest. I believe that most of its interest is warranted, because indeed it is the sort of tools that let you deal with a class of data text where it was extremely tedious and impractical to do anything before, if only for translation, for example, just something as basic as informed translation. And ultimately also, I think it's a wake-up call on the state of automation of your processes. And my suggestion would be, the wake-up call is good on automation. You need to automate what all those white-collar, I would say blue-collar in disguise are doing in your company. But LLMs are just a tiny piece of the picture, and it's usually, for at least as far as supply chain is concerned, it's not going to be, it cannot be anything but on the periphery, because fundamentally those problems are quantitative and LLMs are not like super suited for that.
Well, Meinolf, I'll give the last word to you. What attitude do you see from your clients towards LLMs and AI agents?
So I'll second that, right? I mean, there's now an interest in AI. People have seen that you can do amazing things with it, but it's a little bit like IBM Deep Blue winning 1997 against Kasparov, and everybody goes like, "Wow, this must be amazing, right? There's intelligence there," and then they buy, all the middleware from IBM, which has nothing to do with chess playing, of course. I mean, there's just nothing of the technology in there. I believe that generally speaking, I mean, it's good for us that companies come to us saying, "Hey, we are interested in this technology. We believe there's some there." But then we quickly turn this around from a technology push to a technology pull. So the first question that we ask is, what are your most pressing decisions that you need to optimize? Where are you losing value by making wrong decisions? And then we invoke the correct technology in order to answer those questions with veracity and resilience, and not the other way around. You don't want to employ AI just because it's cool right now. You want to employ it because it really gives you an edge in the market.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. I don't have any further questions. So, Joannes, any closing comments?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I would still recommend for the public, if they want to have a glimpse of what a nicely instrumented LLM is capable of, to give a try to deep research on OpenAI. I think
we're not sponsored.
That's something that it will put things in perspective. That's very nice. And beyond that, I would say, think carefully about whether, if you are facing a problem, whether this problem can be expressed meaningfully as a text completion problem. If it's not a text completion problem, then probably LLM is not the right technology, even if it's packaged as an LLM, as an agent.
And same thought, Meinolf, it's customary here to give the last word to the guests. So, anything you want to close with?
Yeah, I mean, most important thing, LLMs is an epsilon of all of AI. There is a lot more technology out there that can really help your business, that has much more veracity, and actually has proven in the past to be a game changer for businesses. So don't think the LLMs are the is-all and end-all of all of AI.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you both. Joannes, thank you for your time. And Meinolf, thank you very much for yours and for coming back for a second time.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for watching. I hope that was interesting. And yeah, we'll see you next time.